What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video on Buy Sell Cars TV. In today's video, we're going to be discussing should you buy a high mileage Audi TTS, but more specifically, we are going to get into what's the performance like on one of these, are they reliable, are they practical, and where do I see these Audi TTS values moving into the future. So let's jump in the TTS now, take for a drive, and we're going to get into exactly what it's like to own a high mileage Audi TTS. Let's get in the car. Well, let's start with the performance on this car. It's definitely quick enough for everyday use. In terms of numbers, it might not be something that big. 268 brake horsepower, 0 to 60 in just over 5 seconds. But when we look at it as a cheap four-wheel drive, turbocharged performance car, it definitely ticks quite a few boxes on that front. And what I like about this car is because it's quite a small chassis, it's a small car. When you are taking this on more of a spirited drive, down some country lanes, it's nice and easy to drive. All of the power is very usable, and the fact that it's got the four-wheel drive system, you know, the Haldex system, it gives you more confidence. Yes, I know they are a bit more biased to the front, but it's still a peace of mind knowing you have got power going to the front and to the rears. Some people might not like the feel of that, but I'm a big fan of four-wheel drive cars. I like the grip you get, and when they go bad, but they give you confidence. You can drive them in all sorts of weather. Like now, we started today with good weather and now it's starting to rain. So you get the best of both worlds. You can still utilize all of that performance in all different kinds of weather. So performance-wise, it's a big tick for me. And another point which links in with the performance is these cars are very tunable. Even just a basic stage 1 remap takes this car to around 320 brake horsepower, which is a significant increase. And you can go that little bit further, stage 2 plus, which involves, you know, a couple of changes. You need to get a downpipe, high pressure fuel pump, potentially even the front mount intercooler, and you can start to see some decent brake horsepower figures creeping up to around 380 brake horsepower. And when you think to get to nearly 400 brake horsepower, you don't have to break the bank, you know, a couple of grand potentially. You're getting onto figures where you'll probably be keeping up with like a R8 V8, a BMW M4, Audi RS3. A lot of potential with these engines, good tunability, good performance overall. So again, massive tick. In terms of handling, this car does come with a mag ride, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later, but handling wise, around the bends, the car does feel pretty planted. Like I said, the four-wheel drive system does give you that confidence, but equally, small body, not overpowered, you really do feel that this car is planted when you are taking it for a proper blast around some country lanes. It can be a little bit firm, but it is a sports car. It has done 130,000 miles, so I'm not expecting it to be a floating carpet. This isn't a Range Rover, nor is it a Rolls Royce. This is a cheap sports car. But it does what it says on the tin. It handles well, it sticks to the road, good tyres, four-wheel drive, the right suspension. You feel safe and confident in this car. Now let's touch on to how this car feels in terms of the comfort. Well, I've given you a little bit of an insight telling you about the suspension, but it is a firm ride, that is for sure. But the one thing which I will say does help that is these seats. They are so comfortable, very soft leather. The cushioning has done very, very well. They do sag, especially on the driver's seat, but that is very, very common on all of these. Even with the Audi R8s, the seat is pretty much 90% or if not the same on the first generation Audi R8s. So other than a bit of sagging and a bit of bolster wear, they've aged pretty well. On long journeys, how comfortable are they? Just take into account, I'm a very tall person. I'm around 6'4". This isn't the most roomiest and practical car for me, so it's never gonna be super comfortable. But in terms of the actual just seating position, the way this seat feels, the way it drives, overall, for a little sports car, it isn't too bad at all. If you can put up with a little bit of firmness with this mag ride, you'll be completely fine. But don't expect to get into this car and think it's going to be a very, very soft suspension. If you're looking for something like that, you're going to be looking at a basic TT with the small wheels. So this would not be the car for you if that is the case. If you are a regular sized male or female, then you'll have plenty of room in this car and you'll have plenty of comforts. And there are quite a few nice luxuries in this specific TTS. You've got heated seats, we've got the Bose sound system, which is absolutely fantastic, and back in its day was the system to have. You've got electric mirrors which are heated, and on this model you've got the Audi Navigation Plus, which I've mentioned before you're probably not going to be using unless you can get the updates done, but it's a nice looking screen to have in the car, fits very well with the center console. And what I will say is these TTs share a lot of parts from the R8s. The climate control, the door cards, a lot of the things you see in here are parts shared with that first generation R8. Even these steering wheels, these were early days when Audi started to introduce things like flat bottom steering wheels. And on this one, it's a multifunctional, so you can control your volume, you go through your different modes, and you've got the paddles if you do want to go into manual mode with this car. So considering this is a sports car, it still does have a lot of nice luxuries. Now let's get into reliability and what these cars are like to own. I haven't had this TTS for a very long time, but I have owned a TT platform before, and just generally there is a lot of information available with these cars because they're mass produced. These engines are shared in many platforms such as the Golf Rs, the Scirocco Rs, the Edition 30s, so there is plenty of information out there to see what it's like to have these cars, but I'll just go into a couple of the main points with this TTS. The first thing to note about these cars is the suspension, the mag ride. Now, what you will find on some cars is that it's actually been replaced with just coilovers. So when they start to fail and leak, they are very costly and expensive to replace for an original part. So quite the common thing people do is if they have an issue, they will replace it with some uprated coilovers, which isn't a bad thing to be honest, because if the mag ride has lasted this long without any issues, 130,000 miles, if it was to go now, it probably wouldn't make economical sense to replace it for a like for like. So if that did happen, I would probably change it for some coilovers anyway. That would be a refresh for the suspension, and you can tailor it to how you want. So if you wanted to go for something quite comfortable, you could find a company which makes suspension which is going to suit that. Vice versa, if you wanted to go down the track route or make this more of a sporty performance car, you could go for some firm suspension. So don't see the mag ride as a potential scary issue. See it as general maintenance, and if something was to go wrong, you can upgrade your car. Now, another issue everyone does talk about is the Haldex on these cars. This car specifically, because I haven't got a great deal of history on it, I don't know when it was last done, so I will look to replace the fluids in that Haldex, and that is something you do want to stay on top of to prevent it going bad. Again, it isn't going to be something cheap to replace, so you'd rather take preventative measures to eliminate, any issues with the Haldex rather than not servicing it, not maintaining it, and getting into a costly bill if you had to replace that. So that is another thing you need to think about, but it's definitely worth having a read up about those Haldex and how they work, and just generally what's the best way to go about maintaining those. So that is another point. Now the third point is these S-tronic boxes. Generally they are pretty good, but they can have issues. Specifically, if you do go on a test drive and you feel any sort of juddering when you're pulling away, any clunking into gears, and just generally not a smooth transition when these cars are changing gears, then I would say you're going to have issues. When these gearboxes are working, they are absolutely fantastic, these dual clutches. These cars also do come with launch control, and being a sports car, you just don't know how much stress these gearboxes have been through. So if you feel any juddering, any clunking, anything out of the ordinary, I would walk away from that car. It isn't cheap to replace. There are specialists that work on these gearboxes. I would just make sure you take it for a thorough test drive to see if there are any issues. But also, if there is any service issue in the car, see if the gearbox has been serviced at all. If you have got good paperwork on the car, good history, check it's been maintained, take it for a good drive, and hopefully you won't run into any issues with your gearbox. And the final thing you want to look out for on these cars is the oil consumption. I had a 2-litre TFSI before, and that was doing about a litre every 1,000 miles, or maybe just less. And to me, that was concerning. I was thinking, have I got a major oil leak? Why am I having to top up this much oil literally every 2 times I fill up my tank of fuel? Well, if you look in the handbook with these Audis, they are a bit cheeky. So they say these cars can go through 1 litre of oil per 1,000 kilometers, so approximately 600 miles, which is very, very bad in my opinion. I don't think that's okay. It is still something you need to stay on top of, because if for any reason your oil light isn't working correctly, your engine's going to be toast. So stay on top of checking your oil just for the initial period of when you've bought your car, so then you'll get an idea of how bad or how good is your car at burning oil, because some TTSs might not burn oil between services, but equally there may be some which get through a litre of oil every 600 miles. So my advice would be check your oil regularly when you first buy the car, as that will give you an indication of how much oil you're getting through. Then you can maintain it as and when you do so based on your car. So those are the 4 things that you need to look out for on these cars, but overall they are pretty reliable. This car's done 130,000 miles and it drives absolutely fine. They're very well built, everything inside has aged well, everything still works. It's an Audi at the end of the day, you know, VW brand, things are very, very reliable. So don't let high mileage put you off when you are buying a car. I know with this specific car I took a risk because I bought it from the auction, but it was super cheap. It was £2,800 including those fees. Even though it came with a bit of patchy service history, it was worth the risk on this actual car. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't spend top money from an auction without test driving this type of car with patchy history. But equally, if this was on the market, it's still got some history, you can test drive the car, and it would be priced a bit more competitively than a car with full service history. So don't let high mileage scare you. 130,000 miles is not crazy miles anyway for cars these days. These 2-litre TFSI engines go on for a long time, but I've seen a GTI and an S3 with over 200,000 miles, so you know they've got the potential to do that mileage. Just buy with your head, be careful, do your checks, take for a good drive, and ideally find a car that's got good service history. And if it drives good and you maintain it, you should be fine. Now let's get into where do I see these cars going in terms of prices in the future. You know, are they going to be future classics? Will they go up in price? The reality is these cars are mass produced. They aren't highly sought after in terms of collector cars, but they are desirable in terms of people wanting a cheap sports car. So I don't see the values falling dramatically. If you look on Auto Trader now, the cheapest TTS for sale is probably around £5,000 for a S-tronic coupe. I don't see them falling dramatically anytime soon over the next couple of years. And just as a guide, they might just fall a couple £100 a year. They have probably hit rock bottom now. The fact that they are so tunable, they've aged well, the interiors are very nice, they look great. £5,000 represents a lot of value. So in terms of supply and demand, I think these cars are going to hover around that price for quite a while now. So if you are looking to get something like this, not a bad time to buy. You're probably not going to lose a great amount of money. It's not going to cost you an arm and a leg in terms of running it and maintaining it. These cars average around 30 miles per gallon. On the motorway, you can even see 45. But the only thing you'll have to consider is it is a specific market because of the practicality. You get no use out of the rear seats unless you've got a 2-year-old, and the boot space isn't exactly massive. So it is a specific market. I don't see these going up in value in the future, but equally, I don't see them falling in price dramatically. So if you are looking for a cheap sports car, go for it, test drive one of them, see what you think. There's not a lot of bad things I can say about these cars, but what I can say is they represent tremendous value for money. So on that note, guys, I'm going to end today's video here. I hope you've enjoyed this quick review of what it's like to have a high mileage TTS and just talk you through some of the good points, some of the bad things, and what it's like with these cars. I'm going to pop up my socials on the screen now, which you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok, which is at BuySellCarsTV. If you have enjoyed this video, smash up that like button. And if you do want to see more content on this car, because I potentially have a lot of plans with what I'm going to do of tuning this car, hit that subscribe button now. But as always, I hope you've enjoyed today's video, guys. Thank you so much again for watching, and I'm going to see you on the next one. Take care, guys.